Tell us the depths of the gaslighting, because this is actually what I'm almost most intrigued by the story, is the level of gaslighting and people not being able to say, whoa, the emperor has no clothes here. What's going on?
Yeah, it's a tough question to answer. Like, if you talk to someone who's been gaslit, it can sometimes be really hard to describe the ways that it has happened. But she just created this alternate reality that it seemed like everyone was living in. And she was able to do this in a number of different ways. So she surrounded herself with very credible people and allowed all those credible people to point to someone else as the person who really knew what was going on. And unfortunately, my grandfather was one of those key people where a lot of people pointed to him and said, George Shultz knows what he's doing. He's made a lot of good decisions in his life. I'm going to trust that he's made a good judgment call here and follow him into this.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how she put the whole board together. But then within the company, the way it happened was she basically built this culture of fear over the course of 10 years. And I think in a really important lesson, I know a lot of your audience are founders, obviously. I think a good lesson here is that culture does not happen by accident and it does not happen overnight. And for Theranos, this happened over the course of a decade. They intentionally built a culture of fear over the course of 11 years, where any time someone disagreed or questioned Elizabeth, they were fired. And in some cases, after they were fired, they were sued. Oh. And when they were sued, they sent out company-wide emails about it that basically said, if you read the subtext, it said, we will sue you too if you get in our way. We will destroy your life if you try to come up against us. And when people see that feedback loop, they stop speaking up.
Right.
Yeah.
And by the time people like Erica and I get there, you're all of a sudden dropped into a culture where everybody sees all these red flags. Like, I'd say when I was there, every single person essentially knew that this was a fraud. Everyone who worked with that device knew that it could not test 300 things in a single drop of blood, and knew that it was not giving accurate results. But nobody was willing to speak up because we had seen this feedback loop so many times. And what people would do is they would quit.
Yeah.
And sometimes people were even too afraid to quit. And I remember I had one pretty, very close coworker who, when he quit, he actually bought a house in another state, came in on a Friday, put in a full day's work, left his badge on his desk, walked out the door. And by Monday, he was in another state and just never came back. He was just too afraid to even give notice.
Oh my God. I cannot believe that story. He bought a house in a different state and was literally afraid to leave the company.
Like,
he
they
was
would
afraid
chase
to leave
him.
the company.
That's so.
Yeah.
I was just going to say at the time, obviously people were quitting a lot. There were other jobs to have. This was not a bad economic period for the U.S. So there must have been lots of other jobs people with this kind of expertise and talent could go do. So the fact that they put up with this paranoid, horrible environment for this long is astonishing.
It's a hard phenomenon to describe because I think people will naturally think, well, they had stock options, right?
Yeah.
But we didn't. Like, employees did not.
Oh.
Like, Theranos was a rare startup that almost gave no stock options to anybody.
Oh, I didn't remember.
Another red flag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, so what was their rationale? Why? Because everyone else was doing it around them.
Yeah. So I think the rationale for a lot of people was people had mortgages, they had spouses, they had student debt, they had children, they had visas that were dependent on working at the company.
Right.
So I think there were a lot of rationalizations to stay. And I think there were a lot of people who were able to make those rationalizations and basically say, I'm not the person making these decisions. I'm coming in and I'm doing what I'm told. I'm doing my job. And they kind of felt like they had, their hands were relatively clean because they weren't the ones making the call. They were just executing. But also, a lot of people just did not stay very long. Like, people would come and they would do that for a while. Some people would come in and feel like I can activate change in this organization and try and fail and leave. And it truly was a revolving door. I wish there was a way to actually count how many total employees went through that company.